Welcome to the diving meet of Norristown High School against Abington High School. The order of diving for the day is Norristown Morgan Heist, Norristown Beverly Pate, Norristown Gabby Berry, Norristown Greg Epps, Abington John, Norristown Connor Tomlinson, Norristown Brian Gorman. Morgan's first dive. That was a reverse dive layout. Scores are 3 1/2, 4, 2. Beverly is going to be doing a reverse dive in the tuck position. That was an excellent dive. She did go a little bit far away from the board. Scores are 5, 4 1/2, 5. Gabby will be diving a reverse dive in the layout position. Reverse dives are when the diver walks forward off of the board but tilts backward to complete the dive. That was a good dive for Gabby. She did break position a little bit. Scores are 4 1/2, 4, 4 1/2. So her scores did reflect that she broke position. Overall, an excellent dive. Greg is next. That was a reverse dive in the tuck position. That was very well done. Scores of 3 1/2, 5, 5 1/2. Abington's diver will also be doing a reverse dive in the tuck position. And that was an excellent dive. He achieved very much height coming off the board, which gave him plenty of time to straighten out the dive, with high scores of 7, 7 1/2, and 7. Conrad's dive was a reverse somersault. Scores of 3 1/2, 5 1/2, 4 1/2. This is because he over-rotated, which made him land more on his back than on his feet. Brian Gorman is next. Brian also did a reverse somersault. Judges' scores of 3 1/2, 3, and 5. Morgan is doing a forward dive in the pike position. Morgan is a junior here at Norristown High School. That was a very good dive. Her pike was excellent. However, when she came out of it, her legs went over a little bit. Scores were 4, 4, and 4 1/2. Beverly Pete, a junior here at Norristown, is up next. Beverly did a reverse somersault in the tuck position. Beverly's scores were 3, 3 1/2, and 5. Gabby will also be doing a reverse somersault tuck. And Gabby is a senior. Gabby's hurdle was a little bit off, but she still managed to pull off a good dive with scores of 4, 4.5, and 4.5. Greg is also doing a reverse somersault tuck. Judges' scores are 3.5, 4, and 4. Greg wasn't able to completely straighten out when he entered the water, which affected his scores. John from Abington executed a reverse 1.5 in the tuck position with scores of 6.5, 6, and 6. Very well done. Conrad will also be doing a reverse 1.5 somersaults, also in the tuck position. Very well done. Scores of 3.5, 4.5, and 6.5. I'm unsure of why the judges' scores differed so much. However, Connor did get a little bit too close to the board, so that may have affected one or two of the judges' scores. Brian is doing forward 1.5 somersault in the pike position. If you can get the number and the letter, that helps me better. That was very well done. Scores of 5.5, 5.5, and 7. That was very well executed. He got good rotation, good height, and came out relatively straight. Morgan will be doing a 103C, which is a forward dive, 1.5 somersaults in the tuck position. That was a good dive from Morgan. Scores of 3.5, 4.5, and 5. Her tuck could have been a little bit tighter, but overall it was very well done. Beverly's also diving a front dive, 1.5 somersaults in the tuck position. Scores of 1.5, 2.5, and 2.5. This is because her tuck wasn't tight enough, so she didn't get completely all the way around before she hit the water. Gabby also dove a front dive, 1.5 somersault in the tuck position. Scores of 4.5, 5.5, and 5. Greg will also be doing a front 1.5 somersault in the tuck position. Greg's legs went over a little bit on his dive, and that'll affect his scores. Scores of 4, 4.5, 4.5. His tuck was very good. He needs to come out of that dive a little bit sooner in the future. John from Abington will be diving a back dive, 1.5 somersaults in the tuck position. In a back dive, the diver stands with his feet half on the edge of the board and leans backward to execute the dive. Scores of 5, 5, and 5.5. John didn't have much of a hurdle, but he was still able to get enough height to make it all the way around for 1.5 somersaults to enter the water with his hands first. Connor is diving a front dive with 1.5 somersaults in the pike position. That was an excellent dive from Connor Tomlinson. Scores of 5, 6, and 6.5. He held position very well in the pike position and entered the water very smoothly. Brian dove a front 2 somersault in the tuck position for his dive. Scores of 3, 4, and 2. Brian didn't get all the way around, which is why he didn't enter the water as straight as he could have, which affected his scores. Morgan is diving a back dive in the layout position. Morgan had a good hurdle, but she leaned a bit too far back, so she was a little bit further away from the board. Scores of 3, 4, and 4. Beverly will be diving an inward dive in the tuck position. For an inward dive, the diver stands with their feet half on the edge of the board, but when they dive, they push off backwards and lean forwards towards the board to complete the dive. That was very well done. Scores of 5, 5.5, and 5.5. Beverly achieved a large amount of height, so she was able to straighten out when she entered the water. Gabby is diving a 5111A, which is a front dive with 1/2 twist in the layout position. That was very well done. That was a beautiful dive. Her scores were 5, 5.5, and 6. Greg also did a 5111A. Scores of 3, 3.5, and 3. Greg broke position, which means his body bent at the waist during a layout dive, which is when your body is supposed to be entirely straight. John is diving a 103B, which is a front dive, 1.5 somersault in the pike position. Scores of 7, 6, and 7.5. John is able to get a lot of height off of his hurdle, which makes his dives look a lot more straight when he enters the water. Conrad is diving a 104C, which is a front dive, 2 somersaults in the tuck position. That was excellent. That is a very difficult dive to do. Scores of 4, 5.5, and 4. Conrad actually over-rotated. He went a little bit further than 2 somersaults, which is a very difficult thing to do, so we congratulate him on doing so well on that dive. Brian is doing a 5111A, a front dive with a half twist in the layout position. That was a very good dive. Scores of 4.5, 6, and 5. Morgan is doing a back somersault in the tuck position. That was good. Morgan entered the water straight. Scores of 3.5, 4.5, and 4. Morgan was a little bit far from the edge of the board. You're supposed to be approximately 3 feet away, and that may have affected her scores. Beverly is diving a 201A, which is a back dive in the layout position. Scores of 3.5, 3, and 4. Well done by Beverly, but she was also a little bit too far away from the board. Gabby is diving a 402C, which is an inward dive, 1 somersault in the tuck position. That was very good. Scores of 5, 5, and 5.5. Greg is diving a back dive with 1 somersault in the tuck position. I don't believe Greg did that dive in the correct position, so that'll affect his scores. Scores of 2, 2.5, and 1.5. This is because his tuck was not with his knees bent. His dive was more of a pike dive, which is why there was deductions from his scores. John from Abington dove a 2.5 somersault front dive. His scores of 5, 5, and 7.5. That was very well done. A 2.5 is an extremely difficult dive to work on, and to get it that well performed in a meet is a very great accomplishment. Connor dove a back dive, 1.5 somersaults in the tuck position. Scores of 4.5, 5.5, and 5. That was very well done as well. Brian will be diving a back dive, 1 somersault in the layout position. Both Brian and Connor are sophomores at Norristown High School, and they have a lot of potential. They're doing very well. That was very well done. He did not break position. Scores of 6.5, 6.5, and 5. Brian was able to go completely around for the full somersault and enter the water nearly perfectly straight. Morgan is diving an inward dive in the tuck position. Good job by Morgan. Scores of 3.5, 4.5, and 4.5. Beverly is diving a back dive with 1 somersault in the tuck position. Good job by Beverly. Her tuck could have been a little bit tighter, but she did enter the water straight. Scores of 4.5, 3.5, and 4.5. Good job, Beverly. Gabby's diving a back dive in the layout position. Very well done by Gabby. Scores of 6.5, 5.5, and 5. Gabby's scores may have been even a little bit higher if when she entered the water, her feet had been pointed. When divers are judged, main things that the judges focus on are their position while diving, how they enter the water, how much splash there is, and the way their toes are pointed when they dive. Greg dove an inward dive in the pike position. Scored 4, 5, and 5.5. John from Abington will be diving a 51-24D, which is a twisting dive. It is a forward dive with 1 somersault and 2 twists in the free position. That was very well done. Scores of 5.5, 5, and 7.5. He was able to complete the full somersault as well as both twists before entering the water. Connor is diving an inward dive, 1 1/2 somersaults in the tuck position. Scores of 2.5, 2, and 2.5. This is because Connor was not able to come out of his tuck before entering the water, and so he wasn't as straight. Brian is also diving an inward dive, 1 1/2 somersaults in the tuck position. Very well done by Brian. He was able to complete the 1 1/2 somersaults. And the scores were 5 1/2, 6 and 6. Diving is concluded. All of the divers completed all 6 dives, and all of them did very well. Thanks for listening and watching to the Norristown diving meet against Abington High School.